The FBI couldn't believe what they saw as they went down into a place Gene Hackman had never told anyone about. What they found inside made the whole investigation team shiver. This wasn't just any basement. It was a secret that could change everything they knew about Gene Hackman. What were the walls whispering? Who had come in here and never came back? Most importantly, what was so scary that it made the FBI agents pale? Chapter 1. The Final Days. A love story turned tragic. For over 30 years, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakiwa had an inseparable love story. She was not only his life partner, but also his devoted companion in his last years as he slowly fell into the darkness of Alzheimer's disease. For a man with Hackman's intelligence, this disease was nothing but a curse. The scripts he used to memorize were now blank pages, and the characters who were once a part of him were now just memory. The only person who helped him hold on to the pieces of his life was Betsy. Betsy always knew when he needed his medicine, when he needed help going down the stairs, or when he was just thinking about old times. Every day, she read him movie reviews that brought back memories of the great times that Hackman may have forgotten. But one day, on February 11, Betsy Arakiwa left home to go shopping as usual. Security cameras caught her picking out groceries, stopping by the CBS pharmacy, and even buying toys for their 3 dogs. No one thought it would be the last time they saw her. When the FBI later looked at the home security footage, they saw her come back, open the door as usual, go inside, and never come out again. Hackman probably didn't know what was going on because his Alzheimer's was getting worse. He didn't call for help or leave the house. He just stayed there, his world getting smaller, waiting for his wife to wake him up the next morning. But the next morning never came, and when investigators went into the house after almost 2 weeks with no signs of activity, they saw a scene that left them speechless. Hackman was still sitting in his favorite chair with his cane next to him and sunglasses still on his eyes. He was silent, as if he was still waiting for Betsy to come out of the kitchen with a hot cup of tea. The house was eerily quiet, with no music, TV, or other signs of everyday life. When they went to the bedroom, they saw why. Betsy Araki was still lying there on the bed in a haunting scene, with pills on the floor and an open notebook with unfinished writing in it. Investigators thought that Hackman most likely didn't know that his wife had died because he was in the later stages of Alzheimer's. In his mind, Betsy was still alive, so he may have waited for her for a week without eating or drinking, just sitting there lost between reality and his memories. When the FBI checked Hackman's fridge, they found food that hadn't been touched. Hackman couldn't take care of himself. He forgot how to turn on the stove or get water in the days after Betsy's death. He probably just sat there waiting, and then time did the cruelest thing to him for days. But he didn't think much of it because he lived alone, and a neighbor said they thought he wanted his privacy. No one knew that in that house was an old man who was completely helpless and didn't know how to face reality. Maybe things would have been different if someone had found him sooner, but in a world where everyone is too busy with their own lives, Hackman and Betsy's story was just a quiet tragedy happening behind closed doors when the police gathered their personal belongings. A small detail sent chills down the investigators' spines. An old notebook filled with Hackman's handwriting, but not scripts or film notes. It was a list of basic life tasks that Betty had written for him, like when to take his medications and how to turn on the lights. This list showed that even though Hackman was a Hollywood legend, he had become completely dependent on his wife for survival, and when she was gone, his world fell apart with her. If anyone had asked Hackman what was most important to him, he would have said that his wife. He probably wouldn't have talked about Oscars or fame. Instead, he would have talked about Betsy. She saw both the best and worst parts of his life, and Hackman couldn't have gone on without her. Their story didn't end with a goodbye. It ended with silence and an empty house, where an old man sat thinking about the good old days. There were no cheers or lights flashing. It was just a Hollywood tragedy that no one saw coming. When the FBI looked into the house, they found something strange. No one seemed to have noticed that there was a small door locked in the basement, but when it was opened, a secret tunnel appeared. No one knew where it led or why it was there, but Gene Hackman's secret didn't end there. Chapter 2. A House of Silence. The Unnoticed Absence. Gene Hackman's mansion in Santa Fe always had a solemn air to it. Since the pandemic, Hackman and his wife had become more private than ever. They no longer had any get-togethers with friends or long walks on the streets. For a Hollywood legend who used to rule the silver screen, Hackman's sudden disappearance from everyday life wasn't a surprise. Hackman wasn't looking for attention. He had long since left the spotlight and didn't want to return. However, no one expected his absence to last so suspiciously long. Hackman's close friends, who used to call him once a week, noticed the strange silence, unanswered messages, and calls that rang without anyone picking up at first. A longtime Hackman friend said, "Gene and Betsy often enjoyed long trips, but then I realized none of us knew where they went and no one could reach them." Old friends in Hollywood also started to worry. Hackman wasn't a social butterfly, but he also wasn't the type to disappear completely without a trace. One of them called Hackman's neighbor in Santa Fe, and the answer only made their suspicions stronger. "I haven't seen them in a while, but I didn't think much of it. Gina is old." 724. Maybe he just wants some peace and quiet. No one thought anything was wrong, but a tragedy was happening inside that house. On the first day, Hackman's mansion looked normal. Nothing was amiss. On the second day, the lawn started to grow long, which meant no one was taking care of it. On the third day, several packages were left at the door and not picked up. On the fourth day, something strange started to happen. Their 2 dogs started barking non-stop. On the 5th day, a delivery person came and saw that the house was empty. 8-2, still, nothing moved, no lights, sounds, or signs of life. On the 6th day, some neighbors started to notice, but no one thought it was a big deal. On the 7th day, Gene Hackman's mansion was completely silent. One of Hackman's old friends, worried about their strange absence, called the police to check on them. "We've called him many times but haven't heard back." They said the local police got a request to check on Hackman and Betsy, but since there were no signs of anything wrong, so they didn't think it was an emergency. When an officer checked the outside of the mansion, they saw that the front door was locked and there were no signs of forced entry inside. There was a creepy silence. The officer knocked on the door, but no one answered, and they left, thinking that Hackman and Betsy just didn't want to be disturbed. But it was too late. The police were already at Hackman's mansion, and this is what they found. 912. Left them speechless. The living room was clean, the sofa was neat, and the water glass on the table was untouched. But when they went into the bedroom, the mood changed. Hackman was still there, sitting in his old armchair with his thin hand resting on the armrest. He looked like he was waiting for someone to wake him up. Betsy Arawakawa was lying on the bed, and pills were lying all over the floor. But what really scared the police officers wasn't in the bedroom. When they checked the basement, 949 found a hidden door that no one had ever noticed. When they opened it, a secret tunnel appeared right in front of their eyes. They were speechless. No one could have imagined what they were about to see inside. Chapter 3. The Chilling Discovery. A scene of isolation and decay. Gene Hackman's mansion was always quiet, but today the silence felt eerie. Tom Reyes, a maintenance worker in the area, was asked to check the drainage system nearby after people said they could smell something strange in the air. The smell wasn't strong, but 10:26, something was very wrong. At first, Tom thought it might be a small animal carcass stuck in the pipes, but as he got closer to Hackman's mansion, the smell became clearer. A strong smell of time and decay. He slowed down to try to listen. There was no TV, no voices, and no signs of anyone being there. The only sound was a small dog sitting by the door, eyes staring into the distance as if waiting for something that would never come. Tom got chills down his spine, so he took out his phone and called 911. Less than 15 minutes later, the police showed up at the mansion. This time, they didn't just knock and leave. The door was locked, and the curtains were drawn. One of the officers tried calling Hackman and Arikana's names, but only echoes answered. They didn't wait any longer, so they broke down the door and went inside. As soon as the door opened, a cold draft with a bad smell hit them in the face. It was too late. Inside, everything was normal. An old newspaper with the date on it was on the kitchen table, 11:35. Almost 2 weeks old, a cold cup of tea sitting on the table as if someone had meant to drink it but never did. An armchair with a neatly folded blanket, but the house was dead. They slowly went through each room, shining flashlights on the cold walls, until they found Hackman sitting in the mud row, the small room near the back door where people usually took off their shoes before entering the house. He was still sitting there in an old chair with the tip of his cane resting on the floor next to him. He was wearing sunglasses, but his face was pale and sallow, and his thin hands were resting on his thighs with their fingers still loosely clasped together as if he were waiting for something. There were no signs of struggle or a fight, and the room was dead silent. Officers walked in to check Hackman's pulse, but they already knew the answer. How long had he been here? A week? 2 weeks? But more importantly, he had died in complete solitude. While one group of officers checked on Hackman, the other group of officers. When they went into the master bedroom at 12:51, they saw Betsy Arakawa lying on the bathroom floor. She was wearing her pajamas, and her legs were curled up as if she had been in a lot of pain. A pill bottle was on the floor with white pills all over it, and she had a towel and a notebook open on the vanity. A scary question came to mind. Had she fallen or made a choice? There were no signs of struggle or violence, but what had really happened? 13:31, the police couldn't believe what they saw. Two people who had been together for a week of silence and oblivion were now apart. As they looked around, they noticed something strange. Hackman's 3 dogs were still alive, but one of them was dead. A small dog lay in the corner of the kitchen, not moving or showing any signs of life. The other 2 dogs, who were thin and scared, ran to hide behind the police as if they knew something terrible had happened. The medical examiner arrived quickly, but the 14:07, the police already thought Gene Hackman had died, leaving Betsy alone in the empty house until she quietly left herself. But what really shocked them wasn't what they saw in the living room or bedroom. It was what they saw in the basement. When an officer went down the stairs to check, his flashlight shone on an old wooden door at the end of the hallway. This door wasn't on the house's blueprints, and when they opened it, a secret tunnel opened up in front of their eyes. What they saw inside took their breath away. 14:45, threat within. When forensic investigators started looking at the bodies of Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa, the first theories about how they died were quickly thrown out. At first, police thought Hackman might have died of old age and late-stage Alzheimer's. But what about Arakawa? She had died suddenly, with no signs of struggle or outside force, just a weak body and a pill bottle on the floor. But when the forensic results came back, everything became even scarier. 15:25. Hackman died of a heart attack. His Alzheimer's disease made his body weaker over time, and his heart condition got worse. With no one to care for him, he slowly died, showing no signs of outside force. Hackman died quietly in the mudroom chair, possibly from exhaustion or a sudden heart attack. What was most haunting about his death wasn't his death itself, but how alone he was in his last days. When forensic experts looked more closely at Betsy Araka, 1630, shocking fact, she had HIRIS, a dangerous virus that can cause severe organ and respiratory failure. People usually get it by touching the feces, urine, or saliva of infected rodents, or by breathing in dust particles from rodent droppings that get into food or drink. What's even scarier is that antivirus can grow in the human body without showing clear symptoms for many days. This means that Betsy could have been infected earlier, but it wasn't until her death that the disease really took over her. 1637, sudden high fever, severe shortness of breath, muscle aches, prolonged fatigue, and rapid respiratory failure are all signs of the H virus. When forensic investigators looked at the living conditions in the house, they found many signs of rodents that could have caused Arakawa's death. However, the biggest question was when she got the disease, and more importantly, was it really the main cause of her death? Not only Hackman and Arakawa, but also their 3 dogs. One of the dogs died before the 1714 police arrived, but the cause of death was still unknown. The 2 remaining dogs were still alive, but their health had gotten much worse, showing signs of being dehydrated and malnourished. Veterinarians concluded that all 3 dogs had respiratory infections, possibly from an airborne virus in the house. But how could a clean, fancy mansion like this become a place where a dangerous virus could thrive? As the FBI and the investigative team continued to search the mansion, they noticed something strange. The basement did not seem to be on the floor. Blueprints, 1749, original blueprints. An officer found an old wooden door in the basement that wasn't listed in any of the building documents for the house. When they opened it, they saw a dark tunnel. The air became heavy with fear as they lowered the stairs step by step. When the light hit the wall at the end of the tunnel, they froze. This was a glimpse into their isolated world while the police continued to search Gene. 1824, Hackman's mansion had a heavy and strange air around it. What they saw wasn't the home of a Hollywood legend, but rather a place that had been empty for weeks, with no signs of life except for the 2 tired but still alive dogs. There were rotting foods in the kitchen and food that hadn't been touched in days. There were no signs that Hackman had eaten in many days before he died, which made them wonder if he had completely died before he died. Forensic reports showed that Hackman hadn't eaten in a long time, 1858. Stomach, which meant that he couldn't take care of himself in his last days without Arakawa by his side. Hackman may have been completely lost because he had late-stage Alzheimer's. He couldn't remember how to call for help, make meals, or understand what was going on around him. Day by day, the mansion turned into a death trap. Another strange discovery was that the house's air conditioning was turned off, so in the summer in Santa Fe it could get over 35 DCE, 95 DFit, without airflow. The air in the house became thick and oxygen depleted. The suffocating atmosphere could have put Hackman into a coma before he died. But why was the air conditioning off? Had Hackman forgotten to turn it on? Had Arawa turned it off before leaving, or was there another reason that hasn't been found yet? Police found no signs of a power outage, which means that the system was working normally. Someone had purposely turned it off, but who and why? What cooled the investigation was the lack of 2012. There were no new emails or messages on Hackman's phone, and no one had been to the mansion in weeks. There had also been no grocery store bills or food deliveries for over a month. It looked like Hackman had either left the mansion or was no longer able to live a normal life. However, the most mysterious thing was that a police officer found an old wooden door in the basement that wasn't on the original blueprints for the house. When they opened it, they saw a spiral staircase at 2045, descended into darkness. A strange smell rose from below, sending chills down the investigators' spines. They shined their flashlights down below and a secret tunnel appeared. What they found inside shocked them. Chapter 6. The Unanswered Questions and a Legacy Left Behind. Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa were not unknown. They used to be one of Hollywood's famous couples, with friends in high places and fans following their every move. But when they disappeared in their own home, no one noticed anything out of the ordinary. This is because they lived very privately. 2128. After Mann retired in 2004, he stopped going to Hollywood events and even turned down some interview requests. He and Arakawa lived a peaceful, quiet life without social media. Family and friends rarely kept in touch, and close acquaintances said that Hackman became more distant, even from those closest to him. Neighbors thought nothing of it since Hackman's mansion was in a remote part of Santa Fe and he hadn't been going out much for years. Who was the first person to figure out the truth? Worker was hired to check the house after no one answered the phone for several days. When he walked into the mansion, Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa's world had fallen into eternal silence. Betsy Arakawa was found to have contracted the HaHa virus, a dangerous virus that is usually spread by the feces or urine of rodents. What puzzled investigators was that there were no signs of mice or any other rodents in the house. If there was a source of infection in the house, why was only Arakawa infected and no one else in the Santa Fe area? Area reported an outbreak of the virus, so where did she get it? Theories were made that she got it on a recent trip, but her credit card records showed she hadn't left Santa Fe in months before she died. Did someone bring the virus into the house? But how and why? These questions remained unanswered, but the mysterious appearance of Hyras made Betsy Arakawa's death even stranger. Gene Hackman was one of Hollywood's greatest actors, and his career lasted over 40 years, 18 with classic movies like The French Connection, Unforgiven, Superman, and The Royal Tenenbaums, but after he retired, he almost disappeared from public view. He didn't show up at award ceremonies, events, or talk to most of his old friends. The life of a man who had once been at the top of his field was now reduced to an empty mansion and lonely last years. When Hackman died, he didn't have any family members by his side, nor did he have a grand memorial service or moving speeches from other actors. Co-workers, only a silent house, an unsolved mystery, and a cinematic legacy that would last forever. How would people remember Gene Hackman? As one of the greatest actors of all time with 2 Oscars and dozens of classic films? Or as a man who spent his last years alone and went unnoticed by the world? Hackman's story is a warning about how fragile life is. No matter how brightly you shine, what matters most is having someone by your side when the spotlight fades. For Gene Hackman, that light faded in an empty house, but his legacy will live on forever. They found the tunnel and saw what was inside. But the biggest question was why it existed, who used it, and what was inside that not even the FBI dared to say right away. A new mystery had been unearthed, and it might be even more shocking than what was already known about G. Hackman. The tunnel wasn't just a passageway, it was carefully built, with reinforced walls and a complex ventilation system, which suggested it wasn't something that was put together on the spot. Project planned endeavor, but why did Hackman and Akasawa need a secret tunnel? Was it connected to Hackman's mysterious past, or was it part of a private life they were trying to hide? Rumors started to spread about everything from dark Hollywood secrets to shady activities that no one dared to bring up. When the FBI did a full investigation of the tunnel, they found strange items, including classified documents, old electronics, and photos that no one could identify. These weren't just any old things. They were artifacts that 2541 told a scary and complicated story.